Tonight, a new law in Indiana promoting religious freedom for business owners is being called discriminatory. Has Iran had a change of heart regarding a potential deal to delay their nuclear program? And a mentally unstable JetBlue pilot is suing the airline for allowing him to fly. Yeah, you can barely get the words out. I got that right. He is suing them. All that and much more tonight on the Daily Wrap. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha with my co-host and the former executive producer and creator of Joni Loves Chachi. Wow! On ABC.
You enjoyed it, right? It was a great show.
I love
well, you know.
It lasted 7 minutes, but it was a good idea.
It was a good 7 minutes.
I agree, it was. And that's Rick Unger, of course. We're also joined by power attorney Heather Hansen and Forbes.com contributor Bill Tucker. Let's get right to the Daily Download. And Hillary Clinton's email troubles continue to grow like Heather's inbox on a Monday morning. First, a report late Friday by her attorney, David Kendall, you've heard of him, that the Clinton mail servers have been wiped clean, which permanently deleted all of her personal emails. Mr. Kendall writing, and we quote, "I have confirmed with the Secretary's IT support," whoever that is, "that no emails from hdr22@clintonmail.com for the time period of January 21st, 2009 through February 1st, 2013 reside on the server or on any backup systems associated with the server." Not in the quote, nana, nana, nana. RNC President Reince Priebus told Fox News that Mrs. Clinton should have advised not to delete those emails.
There is a minimal threshold of transparency that government employees are subjected to. And so when someone issues an open records request to a department or when there's a lawsuit pending, usually there is an attorney internally that sends an email to the employee saying, do not destroy your emails.
And Mr. Priebus then compared Clinton to the one president in the last 40 years who no potential presidential candidate would ever want to be compared to.
It is customary. I'm sure lots of people watching this know what I'm talking about. And she didn't do it. Sure. And so that's why I'm saying even Nixon didn't destroy the tapes. There are thousands and thousands of emails that are missing.
18 minutes, I believe, was the amount of minutes that Nixon destroyed. And that was Steve Doocy, by the way. He's my neighbor. And that's a story for another time. Obviously, this story is growing, but at this point, we're still not there's not any big drop in the polls for the former Secretary of State in hypothetical matchups, according to a recent CNN ORC poll. Still don't know what ORC stands for. She's beating Florida Governor Jeb Bush, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, and New Jersey Governor Chris Christie 55 to 40%. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee, 55 to 41%, beating Rubio, 55 to 42. You're getting the idea. Rand Paul, 54, 43. Ben Carson, 56 to 40. For whatever reason, John Kasich not worthy enough to throw into that poll, fools. Anyway, more polls to share, including this one from CBS that finds about 2/3 of those polled saying the email scandal did not change their opinion of Mrs. Clinton. About 29% saying their opinion worsened. About half of Republicans said that their opinion worsened, but really could it get any worse? But here's an interesting number. 28% of independents said it did actually get worse. That's not a small number. So, Rick, obviously these polls are somewhat encouraging for Mrs. Clinton. You have that omnipotent look on your face right now, which tells me you're going to say, see, nothing to see here. This is a nothing
Well,
burger.
look, there actually is something to see, but what ruins the something to see is when people like Reince Priebus goes out there and fabricates things. Number one, you only have an obligation to protect emails as evidence when you know that it might be evidence. Nobody knows when those emails were destroyed. Now, I don't think they should have been destroyed. If they were destroyed after she received a subpoena, then he's right. If they were destroyed after she knew or had a reasonably good idea that there could be a legal action, he's right. But they may have been destroyed a year ago. So he shouldn't be saying things like that. Now, as far as the polls go, yeah, big shock. Like the country really cares about this. No, they don't deal with it unless there's something criminal filed against her. And by the way, I can't see where there's anything criminal that could be alleged against her. this is not going to be what you want it to be.
You're shaking your head violently in agreement.
Well, what I do agree that it is not a big deal yet. And until it's a big deal, I think that people should stop focusing on it. But I talked to someone who's a consultant for Navigant. She's an electronic discovery consultant. And her name's Karen Lupus. She told me that these things are not lost forever. It's not like tapes where you erase those tapes and then they're gone. They can live on different servers. They can live in different places. And so if I if I were the lawyer on the other side of any of these lawsuits against her, I would be even more motivated to get those things.
How would you do it, though?
Well, you hire someone like this girl Karen. She works for this company, and that's what they do. That's what they do all day. There's
does she
metadata.
get it off the server? Or
Well,
does
you
she...
don't get it off the server. You often get it off of disaster recovery servers. You get it off of other people's emails. There's a whole way that they can do that. Well, and you have to have the access. You can't just subpoena everyone in the world, and that's where there may be some problems.
But you can get it off the server, because I had a woman who worked for me at one point, and she was fired. In the due process of cleaning out her desk, she decided to wipe the disk on her computer, and she did. And a lot of data had to be recovered. Came off the hard disk. It does live. It lives on.
How much
But
do you want to
I'm
bet
laughing
that
because
hard
I'm
disk
thinking
is
that's
gone?
going to disappear.
That hard disk is gone. If you knew
doesn't
that,
exist.
she knew that.
I know we're all laughing, but wasn't this the wanton destruction of government property in essence? I mean, am I missing
No,
something?
it's her property.
It's her
It was her
property.
property. But you know what?
But it's State Department email, though, on that property.
She turned those over, she says. So you can't allege that she didn't.
It's going to
Well,
be
you can
difficult.
allege it, but you certainly can't prove it.
I just don't know how they went through 30,000 emails that quickly. Personal, private, personal, private. Who did that?
With search words. They use search words. And the problem really, in my mind, is the administration not having better rules. Not saying to her, don't destroy your server at this point. Not having an inspector general in place the entire time that she was there. These things set her up to be able to do what she did. Was that on purpose, or was it just a coincidence?
What was the I'm sorry, one second, Bill. What was the turning point when Marie Harper, I'm sorry, it was Jen Psaki, came forward and said Secretary Rice and Secretary Powell also didn't sign that form?
I don't think there ever was a turning point. I honestly don't, and I think you know that I've been pretty consistent about this. This is the kind of story that gets people like us very involved. It gets inside the Beltway very involved. And by the way, if you're annoyed at Hillary for doing this, I feel your pain. I'm annoyed too. It's wrong. Shouldn't have happened. It did happen, or apparently it did happen, and you can't expect Americans who have other things on their mind to stress out over this unless, as Heather pointed out, something big comes from this down the road.
Bill, last word.
The bigger problem is nobody cares. Right. She can do it because she can do it, and nobody cares, and she'll get away with it. Everything else aside.
Heather, last word. If this were a Republican, would this have been a bigger problem?
I think if it wasn't Hillary, it would be a bigger problem. It's Hillary.
Right. And on that note, it's Joe saying, coming up next, is Iran not keeping their word about a possible nuke deal? This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. Well, the clock is ticking for the U.S. and other world powers to come to a deal with Iran that would slow their nuclear program while easing economic sanctions, in theory. At this point, confidence not high a deal will be reached. Let's bring in former Department of Defense senior analyst J. Matthew McGinnis, now a resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. J. Matthew, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to see a deal or no deal? It sounds like a game show, but deal or no deal?
Honestly, I would be very surprised if we get a full deal tomorrow. I think we may have some political announcement about certain parameters that they've agreed upon, maybe in certain areas like centrifuge numbers. But I still think there's a lot of gaps on some key issues regarding the enrichment, the enriched uranium stockpiles, or what to do about their mountainside enrichment facility at Fordo. Caps on research and development for their centrifuges. These are all issues that I'm not sure they're quite there yet, and I think that they're really looking for a way to extend the negotiations perhaps all the way into June when the final deadline is supposed to be there. And frankly, they're mainly worried about getting something in front of Congress in the middle of April that's going to prevent Senate or House leaders from taking action on new sanctions, for example.
So it's Rick Unger. First of all, do we call you J. Matthew, Mr. McGinnis, or all of the above?
Just call me Matt. That's
Matt,
fine.
okay, Matt. So my question to you is this. I happen to agree with you. I don't think we are going to see a deal. The question is does that work to the president's political benefit, or are we in a situation where his opponents are going to take credit no matter how this goes? If there's no deal, they're going to say it was because of them, and it's a great thing. If there is a deal, they're going to criticize the president for making it. Is there any win scenario for Mr. Obama on this?
Well, I think the pressure on not being able to come up with a deal, I think, frankly, his opponents or his critics within Congress have had a lot to do with that. I think that's the fear that the U.S. is not going to be able to have a coherent line in the negotiations. The Supreme Leader has actually been talking about that for months. He didn't need Senator Cotton's letter to remind him about that. But I do think that for President Obama, he's facing a real uphill struggle if he doesn't come up with something presentable in the next week or two. So I think in the end, this is going to be a tough sell for him. At the same time, I'm someone who is very afraid we were heading towards a bad deal here. So if this avoids something like that and it gives us some more time to talk, I'm for that.
Matt, it's Heather Hansen. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal this afternoon about if there is no deal. The U.S. sort of seems to think that means that the sanctions pressure will just go away, whereas Israel seems to think that we can continue to pressure them and perhaps come up with a better deal. Where do you fall on that?
I think really we could come up with a better deal because we keep forgetting that the Iranians need a deal and we want one, but they need one. And I think that asymmetry we've lost in this discussion. The French have been remembering that and have been pushing the Americans to hold the line better because I think, frankly, the Iranians have such desperate economic concerns right now that they need the money from sanctions. So they're going to, even if they walk away for a while, they're going to need to come back to the table for something, because even just blowing up the negotiations right now doesn't solve the sanctions problem, really. It's going to take a lot of concerted effort by all parties to remove all those sanctions.
Matt, I'm in agreement with you. I don't think a deal gets done, and then probably the deadline will be pushed out to the final deadline, which will be at the end of June. So we appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
So, panel, Bill, does a deal get done?
Well, how desperate does he need to be to get a deal? I mean, is he willing to back off key items in the negotiation? He being Mr. Obama and everyone in the administration. Is this administration ready to back off key demands because they're so desperate to get a deal? Or will they remember, as Matt points out, they need it, we want it, which is a dynamic that should be remembered in these negotiations.
In terms of leverage, that's true. I guess I keep going back to why is there such a need to get a deal done?
I can answer. I mean, look, there's a legacy question. I don't really agree, though, that
he's got plenty of time left in his administration.
Well, but it's this. If this were a good deal, and if it was a deal that could be made, this is obviously good for his legacy. I don't agree he's so desperate to get it done. I think that's more of a spin that we've been getting from his opponents. I do think, however, that what positions us in a better place right now, Iran is taking on a lot of battles around the Middle East now. They are spread pretty thin, and that costs money. They could probably use the reduction of sanctions now more than ever. So we kind of have to wait and see how this ends up. It may get better before it goes away.
But Rick, when you say that you don't feel like he's desperate, when you see our administration or the group seeming to make concessions, like now allowing them to keep
but we haven't seen that.
But that's what we're hearing. That they're okay. So when you hear that, you imagine that is true. That they're now making the concession that you can keep that uranium instead of sending it over to Russia like you were supposed to.
I have followed this religiously. I have heard that is a demand that the Iranians have made, but I have not once heard that we've agreed to that demand.
Today that's being reported. If that is true, and we don't know what the deal is, but if that's true, you'd agree with that's being another concession.
It depends how it's kept there. That's what's interesting about it. If it's kept in a way that they can cheat and use it, then that's a fair point. Then that would be something I'd walk away from. There's so much in detail we don't know, and this has been vexing me through this entire process. It's the same as what we're doing with this tragic airplane story. We keep making guesses about what we think happened, and we're creating the news instead of reporting. And everybody ought to just chill out until we see what this is, and then complain if you don't like it.
It's no longer chill out; it's chillax.
Chillax.
Correct.
The problem with chillaxing is then a deal gets made around us.
Well,
Congress never has the chance.
No, Congress is going to have their chance.
I hope so.
And I think they should.
Right, good.
Bill?
I'm chillaxing over here. Listening to the conversation. No, I'm with Rick on this 100%. It's like until somebody puts something on the table that we can talk intelligently about, why are we wasting our time and everybody else's time talking about a supposed negotiation?
Can we go home now then?
Yeah, we can go.
Good night, folks.
I'll put something on the table. Let's say a deal is done. Do you trust that we could actually verify that the
No.
Iranians are keeping keeping
No,
their
we
word?
haven't been able to yet.
So what's the point of
Right with Heather.
What's the point of
They
making a
cheat.
deal then?
Well,
I don't trust them. I don't trust them. I personally wouldn't be in these negotiations. I'm not the president of the United States, and I don't run a party. So no, I don't think there's any point to negotiating.
That's the thing. I don't think he needs it for his so-called legacy.
Well, I
His
think it'd be
legacy will be
nice,
Bin
but-
Laden, and then what we're seeing now with ISIS.
But I wouldn't be so quick to
In
say
essence.
that we can't verify. I completely agree that there has to be an acceptable means of verifying. And yes, I agree that they've cheated. And yes, by the way, I agree that this is an Iranian trademark of taking negotiations to the
very
last minute and backing up. I agree with all those things.
Heather,
But that
thank you
doesn't
for
mean that doesn't mean that you can't develop a system of verification. It's not like it hasn't been done before in other places. You just have to wait and see if they did or if they didn't.
And we will see tomorrow. So coming up next, a new controversial law in Indiana you may be hearing about is making big news. We'll tell you all about it next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the show, everybody. Well, last week, Indiana Governor Mike Pence signed into law a bill that said the state can't, and we quote, substantially burden, unquote, the religious freedom of people, businesses, and associations in the state. Red flags quickly emerging from there as critics believe the law would allow legal discrimination against homosexuals. Governor Mike Pence defending the law on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
So was it a mistake to sign this law?
Absolutely not. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was signed into federal law by President Bill Clinton more than 20 years ago, and it lays out a framework for ensuring that a very high level of scrutiny is given anytime government action impinges on the religious liberty of any American.
And then the conversation switching to a discussion about tolerance.
Is tolerance a two-way street or not? I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk about tolerance in this country today having to do with people on the left. But here Indiana steps forward to protect the constitutional rights and privileges of freedom of religion for people of faith and families of faith in our state. And this avalanche of intolerance that's been poured on our state is just outrageous.
Stephanopoulos then asked the governor if he would add sexual orientation as a protected class to quiet critics.
One fix that people have talked about is simply adding sexual orientation as a protected class under the state civil rights laws. Will you push for that?
I will not push for that. That's not on my agenda, and that's not been an objective of the people of the state of Indiana.
So after all of that, Indiana's Republican legislative leaders are now saying they're working on adding language to a new state law to make it clear that it does not allow discrimination against gays and lesbians. Heather, Pence ignored answering whether the law is discriminatory or not against those particular groups. Would you add that language into here, or does it stand by itself?
I don't think so. I think that you've got to have more trust for the system and for juries. These laws have not been tested, and the law is much bigger than gay rights and gay people. You know, if a Catholic person, a Catholic company, printed church bulletins, and someone came to them and said, and this is actually occurring somewhere in the world, I'm having this bowling for abortion to raise money for abortion, and I want you to print these flyers up. That person should have the right to say, no, that is against my religion and I'm not going to do so. Mm-hmm. That's what this law covers. There are other people who truly, truly believe that they will be violating their true religious beliefs by doing things not for certain people, but for certain acts. So a woman who was a florist and provided flowers for a gay couple for years, but when they got married, refused to provide flowers for their wedding, has now been sued by the state in Washington. This protects against that. When people have serious beliefs, their beliefs should be protected under our First Amendment.
Rick, you wrote about this today.
I did, and I mean, Heather did actually a good job of laying it out. It's so complicated to understand what this law is really about, and I'm not just self-promoting. I really do recommend you go read this piece at Forbes.com, because I think it'll help you to have a better understanding. The basic issue here, Governor Pence mentioned that Bill Clinton had signed this into law in the federal case.
Chuck Schumer co-sponsored it, by the way.
Well, actually, Chuck Schumer sponsored it in the House, and Senator Ted Kennedy sponsored it in the Senate. So this was obviously a liberal type of a bill.
President Obama was involved as well.
President
years
Obama,
later,
when he was a state senator,
right.
He voted for similar legislation. But here's the difference: as Bill Clinton points out when he talked about this bill, it was about government, and Mike Pence said that. It spoke to the government. What changes in Indiana is that it takes it just from government action, where the government is trying to get you to do something that could violate your religious beliefs, to a private action, which takes you into the case of the baker who refuses to bake that cake for a gay wedding. So there are many levels of complication here. Where I disagree with Governor Pence is I do think he'll find by the end of the week LGBT people will be included as a protected class.
Why don't they do what they just did in Texas, which is create a carve-out for civil rights legislation and laws, so that they're not standing in the way of and not obstructing federal laws. I don't understand what people get out of compelling someone to do business with somebody else.
Well,
because it ultimately is the businessman or woman's fine.
But would you have said that? Would you have said that back when we were getting civil rights legislation, when people wouldn't let black people sit at the lunch counter?
No, I agree. It's a delicate. No, it's a really, really delicate line. I agree. Look, there was a case of Muslims in Minnesota who wouldn't pick up people who were blind with dogs, who were carrying liquor they bought at a customs office because they didn't want to transport any of that stuff. They were compelled by the court to have to do it.
Let me change gears out of legalese and the tricky stuff because we're in the weeds. Is this a 2016 battlefield issue now, Rick Unger?
I don't think so, because very few people are going to understand it, and it's actually going to affect very few people's lives.
I think that's true, but it gets people's emotions really high, so it may well be.
Absolutely.
I think it might be because the rhetoric is just so hot and intense, and all you have to do is go on Facebook.
A lot of it will also depend on whether the states, right now it's pending in Arkansas and Georgia.
Okay.
We'll see what happens there.
And we'll leave it there. Certainly a hot topic. Coming up next, it's potluck time. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Ladies first. I usually compliment you on your color. That's kind of Carolina Panther blue. I don't know where to go with
We're
that.
matching today.
That's right. It's good.
We call each other before the show.
That's right. What are you wearing?
What are you wearing?
More importantly, what are you talking about?
I am talking about, on Friday, a JetBlue pilot filed a lawsuit against JetBlue because he was on a flight from New York to Las Vegas, and while on the flight had a mental break, a psychotic break, and tried to crash the plane. The co-pilot came in, stopped him, saved the day, wonderful. The pilot who tried to crash the plane was actually tried for it and found not guilty by reason of insanity. On Friday, he sued JetBlue for negligence for not noticing that he was insane and for allowing him to fly. And they sued him for $14 million. Now that is, to me, as a lawyer, utterly insane and a real stretch in trying to find... Right. But the lawyer who took this case, it's really a travesty. However, you talk about the recent crash with the German plane, and right now the big talk in legal worlds who do this type of thing is that airline, are their insurers going to be responsible? And it's going to be the same argument. You should have known that he was not competent to fly.
It's not the same argument.
It's a similar argument.
The difference is that the airline in Germany is going to be sued by people who were damaged. They lost loved ones in it, and say you should have been aware. I don't think that pilot who was insane has standing to bring this suit.
He doesn't have damage.
How was he damaged?
Right.
And if you don't have damage, how do you have standing?
But the liability part of the question is he's going to say they should have known, even though I didn't tell them, by the way I was acting, by the things that were going on, they should have known that I was insane, and they were negligent for not knowing that. That's going to be the same question here, because that pilot was ripping up the doctor's notes that said that he was
take it
unable-
on a contingency.
I'm wondering whether
'Cause
his
he's gonna
lawyer has
get
any hope
creamed.
to get. There's 3 U.S. citizens involved in that other crash. I'm wondering whether there's
Yeah,
some hope that
maybe.
he may get some access
Can
to
I ask
them.
you a question? What is my nose doing right now?
Twitching a little
I
bit.
have a little twitch right here, right? My wife will tell you that means an explosion's about to come.
Uh-oh.
All right? And I told her actually this weekend, I said, let's move to Britain. Okay, because my daughter watches Peppa Pig, and they're all so civilized, those pigs,
I
right?
still watch Peppa Pig.
It's a tremendous
It's
show.
a great show. I
But
watch
here-
it with my granddaughter.
Here's my point. It is great that in Britain, besides them being civilized, the law is, and you'll explain it better than I do, if you sue somebody and you lose, you pay their legal
pay.
fees.
That's
And
right.
we don't have that here, so this idiot can go ahead and go ahead with this lawsuit, and then if he loses, oh shucks,
Yeah.
oh well.
It's enormously infuriating to my clients, and some of them are from other countries. And it's true. If you have some skin in the game, you're a lot less likely to sue, and you try a little bit harder to win. And I totally agree with you. That's the way our system should be.
Yeah, and
Final word.
my nose isn't twitching, but I'm ready to explode because this has ramifications for everyone. We all do have
That's
skin
right.
in the game because we wonder why the government's up in our stuff, why people and employers are looking at our places on Facebook and on Twitter and everything else, because they're trying to find out everything they can. And now they've got a new tool to
And it
say, yes,
increases
I need
insurance.
to know.
It
more.
increases the
it's gonna-
cost of
It increases
insurance.
the cost of our tickets
That's
on
right.
JetBlue and
That's
every
right.
other airline.
Exactly. All right, Rick, that's the final word, and that's our transition to your potluck, a rare.
Well, it's a big day. It's a big day because I finally get to tell everybody that the death panels are dead. That's right. You
Good
all
wordplay.
remember.
should write.
Thank you very much. I should be a writer. You all recall the death panels back in the early days of Obamacare. It was actually a phrase that was coined by somebody we know quite well, Betsy McCoy, who joins us sometimes, and made popular by Sarah Palin. And basically, what they were trying to sell was that the IPAB, which is a board of appointed people who, under very limited circumstances, can make changes to the cost structure and the fee structures of Medicare. They can lower it if the prices are going too high. And this, they said, were death panels, because if they lowered the payments or something, that people weren't going to be treated, they were going to be allowed to die, and all these horrible things. Well, it got to an appellate court, and the appellate court in the Ninth Circuit, which is out on the West Coast, said no, threw it out, and today it went to the Supreme Court, and they too threw it out. Say goodbye to the death panels. It was ridiculous, it was annoying, and it was wrong, and you can't possibly disagree with
Her
that.
nose is twitching. I just saw
I
it.
You can't
I don't
possibly
disagree,
disagree
except
with
that,
that.
Rick, they threw it out because it's not ripe. It was an Article 1 non-delegation
It's not
challenge.
coming back.
It is
English,
coming back.
English.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
so
really
the
cool.
challenge, it was a constitutional challenge. It wasn't based on whether or not these are death panels. It was based on whether or not they had the ability to give these 15 people this much power. So the court said, we don't know yet. We don't know what these decisions are going to be. When we know if there's damage, just like you were saying before, there's no damage yet. When there's damage, you can bring it back.
And
so
there's
just
never
wait.
going to be
Just
damage. No,
wait
it's not
and
coming
see.
back. You'll
Just like
see.
you say about Iran.
Not coming back.
Just wait and see.
Not coming back. And by the way, it was not tossed out of the appellate jurisdiction for that reason. It was tossed at the Supreme Court level. The appellate jurisdiction basically said this is the dumbest thing we've ever seen.
I disagree, but we don't have time.
I still say the dumbest thing we've ever seen is that JetBlue
Yeah,
lawsuit.
I
It's
might
bad.
give you that one.
It's
yeah.
bad.
Right? I mean, it's cheap to fly JetBlue, but I want to keep it that way.
Well,
Gas prices are down.
And they
so-
saved the passengers' lives. I mean, that co-pilot.
Exactly right. You don't really hear
Well,
much
but
about
the
that story. You
passengers
think you would
aren't
hear
suing.
more,
Right,
right?
right.
Anyway,
Passengers
quick
aren't the ones.
break. When we come back, more potluck, including my own. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap, everybody. I'm your host, Joe Concha, and you're just joining us. Well, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we're sharing our favorite stories of the day. It's my turn, and you thought I was angry during the last segment. Oh, boy. Can we show the New York Post cover from, I think it was Sunday? Yeah. Village Idiots. That is not a Photoshop. That is a selfie stick, which should be banned anyway. And then these idiots, that really is the only word that you could go with here, are taking a picture while the East Village is basically burning down. They found 2 bodies in the building behind them after a gas explosion, and they're actually taking a picture in front of this carnage. They look so happy. There isn't like even a thought, a consciousness whatsoever that people could have been killed or hurt. The girl from The Sopranos could have been hurt that was in there.
right.
lives there.
Christopher's
D'Amato lives
girlfriend
there, yeah.
that got shot in the woods.
Dre D'Amato.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
lives
yeah,
next door.
Adriana.
Yeah.
Right? So it's just nuts. Fortunately, one came to their senses and actually offered an apology. Let's get it up on screen. It was inconsiderate, you bet, to those hurt in the crash, to the city of New York. I don't know where crash
doesn't
comes
even know
from.
what happened.
Right. It was a gas explosion, not crash, you moron. What happened last week in the East Village is not to be taken lightly, you think? And I regret my course of action. Okay, at least it's an apology. We also have some notes from residents, right, control room, that, okay, these are actually up around the neighborhood, including gawkers. Please keep off our stoop. Gawk from the street. Another one saying, this is a tragedy, not a tourist attraction. Show some respect. Damn right. Good Lord. So people are actually going down there who were visiting the city this weekend to look at the really cool fire that was going on that may have killed people. So yeah, now we actually, all right, so that's confirmed, those two bodies.
2 people are dead.
Okay, I know 2 were missing, now it's 2 dead. I mean, look at that, that's crazy. It's a 5-alarm fire right there, and people are actually taking pictures in front of it. I mean, where'd they go after that? They go to the 9/11 Memorial? Hey, look at us! This is great. I mean, are they going to visit, Amsterdam next, go in front of Anne Frank's house? I mean, where does this end? So anyway, good job, New York Post, because that was one of the better headlines that they've ever had. And I just weep for the future, that the fact that it wasn't like one person taking a picture. This was a whole group.
The clue is it's called a selfie. Okay. That's your biggest
Not a
clue
multi.
right there. It's a selfie. It's a self-centered action by
Well,
a group of
I don't want-
self-centered
but we
people.
can't
And it's like,
condemn
look, they may
selfies.
all be really nice people, Rick. I'm not saying they're not
But
nice
you can't
people,
condemn selfies. Most people will use selfies to take nice pictures of them with their grandchildren or their wife. Not to do what these idiots did and take a selfie in front of a disaster scene where there was 2 people laying dead inside those buildings that collapsed.
Heather, can I sue them? I mean, I know we're talking about not suing, but
You know what?
sue
I
them
bet
for
you could
stupidity.
find a lawyer who would let you sue them for your emotional distress. 'cause
We actually
clearly
know
you
a
were
lawyer who will
distressed.
take most any case. He's representing a pilot against JetBlue right now.
Yeah, I'm going to
Give him a
name.
call.
I was crying.
Absolutely.
pro bono. Anyway, Bill, I didn't need almost any of your time. This is great. It's all yours.
It's awesome.
all yours.
Well, over the weekend, there was an economist who tweeted out a tweet. And it's rare that an economist can create this kind of stir. She works with the Department of Labor. She's an economist. Her name is Elizabeth Ashak. And she tweeted out that people in red states vote for Nazis to govern them and call themselves Christians. It will not end well for them. Hashtag boycott Indiana. Thank you for that soothing, calm piece of rhetoric from you, Ms. Ashak. Christians are Nazis and it won't end well in Indiana. Now, to be fair, she has said, I didn't do that. My account was hacked. She's deleted the account. She's deleted everything about her off the internet because she has probably been subjected to the same kind of hateful, vile crap that she was spewing out
If it was
in
her.
that tweet.
If her account was hacked.
We need to stop with the whole hacked excuse.
Let's just stop.
I think Anthony Weiner did that.
How about we just? We managed to have an entire third block discussion about Indiana's law. Not once did we ever insult one another. Not once did we call each other names. No. It's gotten to the point where it's like we can't have a conversation without inflaming it with this sort of rhetoric, and it's just not helpful. It's not necessary.
You know, it's interesting. I don't often agree with Rush Limbaugh, believe it or not. But one of the things that he said today was this law is turning up to the hands up, don't shoot, where it's taking on a life of its own that isn't necessarily grounded in fact. You know, this law, as we've discussed, does exist other places and does have some benefits. And so people really need to read everything they can on it to get a better sense that rather than just tweet.
Right. Yeah,
very
the whole perception that it seems to be is the evil white governor of the conservative state wants to make sure that gays and lesbians stay where they belong.
You're right. The perception is that Indiana passed a law that says, please feel free to discriminate against gay Americans.
Right.
That's not what it is.
And don't 25
it
other
is overstated.
states have this law?
They have variations of it. And you've got, again, what the key here is making the distinction between private lawsuits and lawsuits involving the government. That's critical.
And this is the only state that has one or two.
I think
there's two. I think
maybe
there's
two that have private, and that's what makes this.
But to Bill's point, everybody picks a side, takes on the extreme view,
Yeah, they do.
and everybody talks past each other.
Not that we differ, it's the way we differ that's becoming a problem.
That's philosophical. You almost sounded like Hirschfeld there. That was good stuff. Anyway, that's all the time we have for Potluck, but it's time for Yay or Nay. Next, this is the Daily Wrap only on Newsmax TV.
anything. It's so
Time for
tricky.
yay or nay. First up, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee is trying to impose term limits on Supreme Court justices who currently serve life terms. Give me a moment here, people, because apparently my mic is not on. When do you ever see this on live television? Very often. There we go. In a speech.
Let me fix you.
No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Try it now.
Perfect, thank you. In a speech over the weekend, the governor saying, quote, if the president who appoints them can serve 8 years, the person they appoint should never serve 40. That has never made sense to me. It defies that sense of public service. Mr. Huckabee makes a pretty valid point there, but Article 3 of the Constitution, as we all know, says otherwise. Quote, the judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior, spelled in the British way, and shall, at stated times, receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. So, should there be term limits placed on Supreme Court justices, yay or nay, Rick Unger?
Nay. And I'll tell you why I disagree with Governor Huckabee. You know, one of the things that our founders were clever enough to realize was the benefit of continuity. And this absolutely comes from where they had come from the king in England. And we've seen this discussed a lot recently with the Queen and all the prime ministers she's had. The Supreme Court is the one place that we have where you have people who have seen a lot and seen the sway of how things have gone in our country. That's a real advantage, and I wouldn't throw that away so quickly.
Heather.
I agree, except that I would hope that the justices would know enough to know when they should step down. And I feel like sometimes, like right now, we have a justice who is older and who falls asleep during the State of Union.
Only because she had a couple glasses of
but
wine.
perhaps, I feel as though perhaps she's staying because of politics and who will be appointing who. And I just think that it is probably, people need to know when it's time.
Bill?
Well, I agree, and I go nay too as well, because as compelling as Rick's argument is, I oppose the election of judges because it becomes a political issue. If you impose term limits, it becomes a political issue, and God knows we'd never have a full sitting Supreme Court ever again because everybody would be held up in Congress and nobody would ever be approved.
I'm a nay as well, under the rule of what he said. So who's more threatening, Vladimir Putin, Bashir al-Assad, that's the Syrian president, or Barack Obama? According to a new Reuters IPOSO poll, the answer may not be as obvious as you think. 34%, that's a third, consider President Obama an imminent threat to what? Not quite sure. Ahead of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who only got 25%, and the aforementioned Syrian president, Bashir al-Assad, who has a funny mouth, he only got 23%. So, is President Obama more of a threat than Putin or Assad, yay or nay, Bill Tucker?
Yes. Because nature abhors a vacuum. He's a weak president, and a weak president of the largest country, most powerful country in the world is a bad.
Wow, it wasn't even a yay, that was a yes. Go ahead, Heather.
You know, I don't think he's more of a threat in an existential way, but I understand why people think so, because he has more immediate impact in every aspect of our lives than either of the others two that you named.
Rick?
You know, I was going to say something really insulting, and now I can't because Bill said yes.
Go ahead. You can
I don't know what to
You can
say.
insult
How
him.
can
It's
you
all right.
possibly believe that? Look, you may not like the president, but he is our president, and he does not wish us harm. And
It
you
has
can't.
nothing to do with
yes,
wishing.
it
It has
does.
nothing
You
to do
can't
with
say the
wishing
same
harm.
about those other two people. That's just terrible. I just be. I'm.
Okay.
You've
Bill.
made
We
me
gotta go.
speechless.
We gotta go.
Yeah.
I'm a nay because the questions is the problem here. Imminent threat you might not want to go
the
with.
question's
imminent
offended.
threat.
Yes. Anyway, now we have to turn to a rather sad story. Jon Stewart and Comedy Central have officially named Stewart's successor, Trevor Noah. And we join all of you at home in saying to no one in particular, Trevor who? While he has a long resume, the relatively unknown South African comedian has appeared on the show only 3 times before, making him an odd choice to fill Stewart's shoes. So, can newbie Trevor Noah do the job, yay or nay, Heather Hansen?
I don't think so. I don't think anybody can fill those shoes. If he makes it a totally different show with a totally different lineup, then maybe, but I don't think so.
Rick, you worked in
I
entertainment?
haven't got a clue. I've never seen him. He may be awesome. I don't know.
I literally don't know. Like Trevor, who? And to
He's been
Heather's
on 3
point,
times.
he's got to sit in Jon Stewart's step.
I'll give him a chance.
Okay, yep, give him a chance. I am a nay because you never want to be the guy who follows the guy. You want to be the guy who follows the guy, but not the guy who follows the guy. Anyway, finally, all she wanted was a slushie. And we all get those late night cravings, Rick does, and that could send some of us driving to the 7-Eleven at pretty weird hours. But when a 4-year-old girl from Philadelphia got a hankering for a slushie, she didn't ask her parents to go get her one. She grabbed her purple raincoat and she set out on her own. Yep, you heard me right. 4-year-old jumping on a Philadelphia bus at 3 a.m., chanting, quote, "All I want is a slushie," unquote. Should the little girl get free Slurpees for life? Yay or nay? We only got 15 seconds to go.
No, she should get punished.
Yay! Love that girl.
Oh.
Yay, but her parents they should call diapers or something, because how'd she get out of the house in the first place? Anyway, thank you, panel. We'll see you tomorrow night, 6 o'clock. I'm Joe Concha saying good night and good luck.
Do you own mutual funds?